Welcome to Fortress of Faith with Tom Wallace, calling North America to repentance and revival.
We're back once again at the corner of truth and courage. You're listening to Fortress of Faith. This is Tom Wallace. Yesterday, I touched in a portion of Scripture in 2 Corinthians chapter 10 and verses number 4 through 5. I want to kind of follow up with some more thoughts about this aspect that our fight here as Christians, we need to realize if you're a child of God and you're not recognizing the fact that we are in a spiritual war, that you are in the middle of a battle, you're probably not getting it. You're probably missing the big picture. You're probably scratching your head wondering, why in the world are things going on in the world like they're going, like they're happening, and act like we've never, you can't believe these things are going on. But we forget, I'm partially there to blame myself. I forget I'm in a battle. We're in a battle, a spiritual battle. But our weapons are not political. Although you're going to hear from me, vote. You're going to hear from me, get involved, stand, be the salt and light in your community. When evil shows up, be courageous to stand up and say, God says that's wrong, that's evil, and I'm siding with God. And I'm going to be involved in every way to keep it out of my society, keep it out of my schools, keep it out of my government, keep it out of my nation. And if that means I get involved in the political voice, then so be it. But please understand that the answer and the solution is not a political solution. We're struggling with a spiritual problem, and spiritual problems do not have physical or political answers. And all these political and immoral things that are going on in our community are results of our spiritual problem. God tells us in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 4 through 5, for the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, so they're not physical. We're not in a physical fight, and our weapons are not carnal, physical, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. God has given us something to be able to topple and tear down strongholds, casting down imaginations, verse 5, and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing it into captivity, every thought to the obedience of Christ. Don't think, that the issues and problems, let's say you're struggling with an addiction, or, you just can't control yourself. You're going through depression and all that stuff there. God has given us the capability to pull down these strongholds, even to put into captivity every thought, even our thinking, even when we're struggling in our mind, to be able to face the world. God has given us these abilities to overcome. God has not called us to fail, but to be overcomers. And I want to draw your attention to some history that the Bible covers, and is some great encouragement for us if we look at this there. Even when we think that our world and all that stuff is going south, and I'm of the belief, I hope I'm wrong, I really do, but I don't think that Trump is going to win the election. I would hope he does. I really do. Not that he's the answer for America. I have my issues with him. But he is certainly a president that will lean more to positions that Christians can really get behind. When he was first elected a number of years back, I didn't know if I could trust him. But he delivered more than any other president that I'd ever seen of his promises, and I was very impressed with that. Not necessarily in the manner in which he did it, but I feel that that the president that America needs would be a man like President Trump. But my prayer every election is, God, please do not give our nation what we deserve. Please have mercy and give us what we need. And I believe that our nation is deserving of judgment. But God can even take evil, wicked people and turn them around. Look at some history. Proverbs 21 verse 1 says, "The king's heart is in the hands of the Lord. As the rivers of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will." God is going to be glorified, either in the judgment of the wicked and the bringing down of the wicked, or he'll be glorified in the reward of the righteous. God will be glorified. And God has a way of turning what we think are great disasters and turning them into victories. And if you look in the Old Testament, you see some great world leaders. We go back to the Egyptian time of rule in Ramesses II when he was on the throne, and how God showed himself mighty in the administration of Ramesses II. Also with Assyria, when you had Sennacherib on the throne, God showed himself mighty even over the great mighty king of Assyria. And yet God used the wicked rule of these people, of the Assyrians, to bring judgment upon Israel in such a wicked, cruel way. And yet God still reigned over his reign. Then you come to the great king of Nebuchadnezzar as he ruled of Babylon. And in the book of Daniel, you see how God showed himself mighty in that nation and in the man's life of the great king Nebuchadnezzar. At that time, he truly could call himself the King of Kings. He was. I mean, he ruled the known world at his time. There was no other kingdom before that could hold a candle to the mass of land and peoples that Nebuchadnezzar ruled. And God showed how he could bring this man to his knees, literally. And then to think that there would be no one greater than Babylon, God raises up another nation, Persia, and a new king, Cyrus, who God called the Shepherd King. I want to spend a few days talking about these men's lives and how God did a mighty thing. Let's turn our time quickly to Egypt, and we look at the life of Ramesses. Now, at the time here, you see that this was one of the greatest kingdoms on earth at that time. The Egyptians were feared by many people, and they had enslaved the Jews. And you know the story of Moses, how he was born and how they feared, how these Jews were outnumbering the Egyptians. And so the decree went out to kill every male-born child. And, well, a family said, no, we're not going to do that to our child. And they tried to hide Moses. I'm sure there were others who were doing it too. But how God miraculously spared the life of Moses after he was discovered by Pharaoh's daughter. And instead of bringing the child to be destroyed, God put love in her heart and pity in her heart for that child and took her as one of her own, but then saying, hey, let's have a nursemaid take care of this baby while he's being nursed. And miraculously, he was being nursed by Moses' own mother. Amazing turn of events. Well, as that boy grew up there in the household of Pharaoh, educated to the finest degree of that a son of Pharaoh's daughter could be raised, alongside who was going to be the future Pharaoh, his half-brother Ramesses, who became the Pharaoh after Moses fled into the wilderness. I find it interesting about his life. 40 years, we find him being raised as an Egyptian, but yet he did not succumb to the things of this world. Instead, he gave himself mightily to God and recognized, even though I'm being raised as an Egyptian, I'm still a Jew. I'm still a child of the promised nation, and saw the mistreatment of his own people and took a stand and accidentally killed an Egyptian, and the matter was known, so you know how he fled. So 40 years he spent in the glory of Egypt. Then he spends 40 years in the backside of the desert working for the prince of Midian there, which is currently today what we would call Saudi Arabia. And there he is looking after sheep. So here he's a shepherd for 40 years in the wilderness. Well, that was preparation for what was going to be ahead, because after God delivered the children of Israel out of the hands of the Egyptians, he spends 40 years again in the wilderness, leading people who were acting just like sheep, always disobeying, always complaining, and so on. But what do we know of this leader of the great Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, Ramesses II? Well, what's interesting, as I read earlier on, it said that every king's heart is in the hands of the Lord. As the waters of the earth, he directs them. What I find interesting, twice when we come to the story of Moses telling Pharaoh to let my people go, we find that the Lord hardens his heart, keeps him from relenting and giving, even though the plagues were very hard and difficult for them to weather through. I mean, they were difficult things for them to manage. And he was almost ready to say, get out of here, be gone with you. But God, the Bible tells us, hardened his heart in Exodus chapter 9 and Exodus chapter 14, after the death of the cattle. And he said, listen, this is our main livelihood. You're taking, this judgment is so sore and vexing to us there. He was almost relenting to get go, but then God hardened his heart. And then after finally he did let them go, God hardened his heart again, but then caused him to chase after Israel, which led him to his final destruction. But before they actually left, the point was so bad that Pharaoh and the people said, listen, take whatever you want and get out of here. And so the Jews were able to spoil, in Exodus chapter 12, verse 36, they spoiled the Egyptians. In other words, they took of their wealth and took of their greatness and took it with them. It's interesting that God led them by the way of the south, even though they knew Israel and Jacob, the land of Jacob and land of Abraham was north of them. God led them to the south. Why? Because he was going to deliver them through the Red Sea. And what an interesting story and a situation shows us that God, and here there are people, these are people that had no army to fight, no army to take a stand against Pharaoh, but God worked in a mighty way. Our weapons are not they're not carnal, but they're strong to cast down imaginations, every high thing that is exalted. God has a way of bringing it to its knees. And I hope this will strengthen you to have faith in God, that God is still on the throne, even though our world seems like it's falling apart. That's going to be it for today. So join us again tomorrow as we talk more about how God was able to change the heart of great kings. God bless you.